When price does come into a supply zone and tries to push price down, so you see the aggressive selling actually fail, this is an indication that this is now what we call a supply to demand flip zone, because you're seeing those interactions, you're seeing those aggressive sellers actually fail in the market, which is one of the most important things to understand. Now from here, another thing I want people to really understand and depict from this is a couple of things, right? So when price comes to retest this demand zone over here, this new key level, which we're now looking for demand, what I want people to understand is that as price comes into this demand, we see the exact same thing where the majority of the volume is down here, and the majority of it corresponds to a negative delta. So a negative delta again represents aggressive selling, and notice how the aggressive selling is eventually overtaken by the aggressive buying. And when I spoke about finished versus unfinished auction, this is what I'm talking about. A finished auction, just for basic knowledge, a finished auction is when there's a zero on one side of the market, right? So in this case, we have a zero over here. So we have 4 and 0. In this case, we have 15 and 0. We have 2 and 0. We have 30 and 38 and 0. And then we eventually have 9 and 0, right? So when you see a high and low in the movement, so when you see this kind of price action, when you see the tip price action over here, which is what we're looking at. Now, this high and low, in this case, this kind of low in the movement was actually validated by a finished auction, let alone buyers, aggressive sellers, not being rewarded, right? So this is what validates the supply zone itself, right? So what actually happened, if I play price on, what we saw over here at around, I think this was 10:15 Eastern time, AM Eastern time, what we've seen over here is we've seen aggressive sellers that haven't been rewarded, right? So you see failing aggressive sellers, right? This is failing aggressive sellers, hence why we see a negative delta, and we see a finished auction, right? So the way you want to look at a finished auction, so this is a finished auction, and the way you want to understand a finished auction is that buyers and sellers have kind of agreed to, you can essentially see it as an argument that's kind of ended, right? Think of it as an argument or an auction between buyers and sellers. When you see a 0, it represents that that argument has ended and price is now willing to move in a certain direction. And how do we identify that direction? Is from using the aggressiveness of sellers and buyers. Understand aggressive sellers have not been rewarded, and this is where passive buyers step in, right? So when you see aggressive sellers in this case, right? When you see aggressive sellers try to push price down and fail, the passive buyers are coming into this region, this same key level, and driving price higher, right? So this is where the passive buyers step in, right? And understanding that there's a lack of activity at this level, there's a lack of selling that's being rewarded despite their aggressiveness, right? So